There is a silent force shaping every decision you make, every emotion you feel, and every limit you believe you have. Most people spend their entire lives fighting the outside world, never realizing that the greatest obstacle has always existed within their own minds. They search for better circumstances, better relationships, and better opportunities, while carrying the same patterns of fear, doubt, and hesitation that quietly recreate the same results over and over again. Until the mind changes, nothing truly changes. The mind is not your enemy, but it is also not naturally your servant. Left undisciplined, it follows old habits, old fears, and old stories. It convinces you that you are defined by your past, by your failures, by the opinions of others, and by the comfort of what is familiar. This invisible programming becomes so deeply rooted that you mistake it for your personality. But what if everything you believe about yourself is simply a pattern that has been repeated long enough to feel permanent? Today, you are invited to look beyond motivation and into transformation. Real change does not happen because someone inspires you for a few moments. It happens when you begin to observe the machinery of your own mind with complete honesty. The moment you stop reacting unconsciously and start responding with awareness, you reclaim the power that has always belonged to you. Every thought becomes a choice instead of a command. Every emotion becomes a teacher instead of a prison. This rare message is not about becoming someone else. It is about removing everything that prevents you from becoming who you truly are. You will discover why your mind resists change, why comfort often becomes the greatest obstacle to growth, and how disciplined awareness can reshape the way you think, act, and live. If you are willing to question the beliefs that have controlled your life until now, then stay with complete attention, because the transformation you seek does not begin tomorrow. It begins with the very next thought you choose to believe. Most people believe that the greatest obstacles in life are outside themselves. They point to difficult circumstances, unfair treatment, lack of opportunity, or unfortunate timing as the reasons they cannot move forward. While these external factors certainly influence our lives, they are rarely the true source of limitation. The real barrier is often hidden beneath conscious awareness, quietly directing every decision, emotion, and reaction. Before you can change your life, you must first recognize the invisible patterns that are already controlling it. Without awareness, you continue living on autopilot, repeating the same behaviors while expecting different outcomes. The human mind is designed to create habits. This is one of its greatest strengths because habits allow us to perform daily tasks efficiently. Imagine having to relearn how to walk, drive, or speak every single day. Habit frees the mind from unnecessary effort. But this same mechanism also creates mental habits that are far less beneficial. Thoughts become routines. Emotional responses become automatic. Beliefs become unquestioned truths. Over time, these patterns become so familiar that you stop noticing them altogether. Consider how often you react before you think. Someone criticizes you, and anger immediately appears. Someone ignores your message, and insecurity begins speaking inside your head. An unexpected problem arises, and fear immediately predicts failure. None of these reactions happen because you consciously choose them. They happen because your mind has been trained through repetition. Every repeated experience leaves an imprint. Every emotional memory strengthens a pathway. Eventually, the reaction feels natural, even though it was learned. This is why two people can experience the exact same situation and respond in completely different ways. One sees rejection as proof that they are not good enough. Another sees it as valuable feedback for growth. One views failure as the end of the journey. Another sees failure as part of the learning process. The difference is not the event itself. The difference is the pattern through which the event is interpreted. Your mind does not simply observe reality. It filters reality according to beliefs that have been reinforced over many years. Many of these beliefs were formed long before you had the maturity to question them. As children, we absorb information without analysis. We listen to our parents, teachers, relatives, friends, and society. We hear statements repeated often enough that they become part of our identity. Perhaps someone told you that success is only for the lucky. Perhaps you were compared to others until you believed you would never measure up. Perhaps failure brought embarrassment, so your mind learned to avoid taking risks. These experiences quietly built the framework through which you now see yourself. The remarkable thing about the mind is that it protects what is familiar, even when what is familiar causes suffering. Your brain values certainty more than happiness. If anxiety has become familiar, your mind will unconsciously recreate anxious situations. If self-doubt has become part of your identity, your thoughts will constantly search for evidence that confirms it. This is not because you enjoy suffering. It is because the mind mistakes familiarity for safety. Notice how often your inner dialogue repeats the same phrases. You may tell yourself that you always fail, that you are not disciplined enough, that you are too old, too young, too quiet, too emotional, or simply not capable. These statements may feel like objective observations, but in reality, they are rehearsed stories. Every time you repeat them, they become easier to believe. Every belief influences your emotions, and every emotion influences your actions. Your actions then produce results that reinforce the original belief, creating a cycle that feels impossible to escape. This cycle continues because most people identify completely with their thoughts. They assume that every thought entering their mind represents truth. But thoughts are not facts. They are mental events. They are shaped by memory, conditioning, emotion, and expectation. A fearful thought does not necessarily predict danger. A doubtful thought does not accurately measure your ability. An angry thought does not define reality. When you fail to recognize this distinction, your thoughts become your master instead of your servant. Awareness begins the moment you observe your thoughts without immediately obeying them. Imagine standing beside a river rather than being swept away by its current. The thoughts continue flowing, but you no longer become every thought that passes through your mind. You begin asking different questions. Why did this reaction appear? What belief created this emotion? Is this interpretation actually true, or is it simply familiar? These questions create space between you and your conditioning. In that space, something extraordinary becomes possible. You realize that you are not the voice constantly speaking inside your head. You are the awareness listening to it. This distinction changes everything, because once you become the observer, you gain the ability to choose. Instead of reacting automatically, you pause. Instead of assuming your first interpretation is correct, you examine it. Instead of allowing fear to dictate your actions, you recognize fear as one piece of information rather than an unquestionable command. This process requires honesty. It is much easier to blame circumstances than to investigate your own patterns. The ego prefers explanations that preserve comfort. It says the world is unfair, people are impossible, and success belongs only to others. These explanations protect you from the discomfort of responsibility. Yet responsibility is not about blaming yourself. It is about recognizing where your influence begins. You cannot always control what happens around you, but you can gradually transform the patterns through which you respond. Pay attention to the situations that repeatedly disturb your peace. The same conflict may appear in different relationships. The same disappointment may emerge in different careers. The same insecurity may arise in different environments. These repetitions are rarely accidents. They often reveal unresolved patterns waiting to be understood. Life has a way of presenting the same lesson until it is learned. Every repeated struggle is an invitation to look inward rather than outward. Observe your emotional triggers without judgment. If criticism immediately creates anger, ask why. If praise becomes necessary for your confidence, ask why. If silence makes you anxious, ask why. The goal is not to criticize yourself for having these reactions. The goal is to understand them. Judgment keeps the pattern hidden. Curiosity brings it into the light. Once seen clearly, unconscious behavior begins losing its power. Many people wait for extraordinary moments before they begin paying attention to their minds. They believe transformation requires dramatic events or overwhelming motivation. In reality, awareness grows through ordinary moments. It appears when you notice yourself complaining. It appears when you recognize your tendency to procrastinate. It appears when you catch yourself assuming failure before taking action. Each small observation weakens the automatic nature of the pattern. The disciplined mind is not one that never experiences fear, doubt, or frustration. It is a mind that recognizes these experiences without surrendering to them. Emotional storms may still arise, but they no longer dictate every decision. Instead of being driven by every passing impulse, you begin acting according to values that you have consciously chosen. This shift is gradual, but every moment of awareness strengthens it. As your awareness deepens, you discover that many limitations you once accepted as permanent were never permanent at all. They were habits of perception repeated so consistently that they felt like reality. Every time you interrupt an old pattern, you create the possibility for a new one. Every conscious response weakens unconscious conditioning. Every deliberate choice reminds the mind that it no longer has to live according to the script written by fear, habit, or the past. The difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one is rarely intelligence, talent, or even opportunity. More often than not, it is the ability to choose a response instead of surrendering to a reaction. Most people spend their days being pushed from one emotional state to another. A compliment makes them confident. A criticism makes them insecure. A delay makes them impatient. A failure makes them want to quit. Their inner world is constantly controlled by external events because they have never learned the discipline of conscious choice. They believe they are making decisions when in reality they are simply reacting to whatever life places in front of them. Reaction is fast. It requires no awareness and no effort. It is the mind operating from habit, memory, and emotion. The moment something happens, an automatic response appears. Someone raises their voice, and anger rises before understanding. Someone succeeds, and comparison begins before gratitude. Someone disagrees with you, and the desire to defend yourself appears before listening. These reactions happen so quickly that they feel like part of your identity. You begin saying, "That is just who I am." But who you are and how you have been conditioned to react are not necessarily the same thing. Conscious choice begins with a pause. It is the simple but powerful ability to create a small space between what happens and how you respond. In that space, you discover freedom. Without that space, you are merely following programming that has been repeated for years. Every reaction strengthens the old pattern. Every conscious choice begins creating a new one. The pause may last only a few seconds, but those few seconds can determine the direction of your entire life. Many people think discipline means forcing yourself to work harder or denying yourself comfort. While discipline certainly includes consistency, its deepest form is mastery over your own responses. Anyone can remain calm when life is easy. Anyone can speak kindly when everything goes according to plan. True discipline reveals itself when circumstances become uncomfortable. It is maintaining clarity when others panic. It is choosing patience when frustration seems justified. It is remaining focused when distractions invite you in every direction. Your emotions are not enemies. They exist for a reason. Fear can warn you of danger. Anger can reveal that something important has been violated. Sadness can remind you of what truly matters. But emotions become destructive when they become your commander instead of your messenger. Too many people obey every emotion without examining it. If they feel unmotivated, they stop working. If they feel afraid, they avoid the challenge. If they feel discouraged, they abandon their goals. They assume that emotions should determine action. A disciplined mind understands something different. Feelings are temporary visitors. They arrive, remain for a time, and eventually leave. Action, however, should be guided by principles rather than passing emotions. Imagine a person who exercises only when they feel motivated. Their progress will always depend on changing moods. Compare them to someone who exercises because they have committed to discipline. Motivation may come and go, but commitment remains. The disciplined individual gradually becomes stronger, not because they always felt inspired, but because they acted regardless of temporary emotional weather. Every choice you make strengthens a particular version of yourself. Each time you choose comfort instead of growth, comfort becomes easier to choose again. Each time you choose courage despite fear, courage becomes more familiar. The brain is constantly learning from repetition. It pays less attention to your intentions than to your actions. You may tell yourself that you value health, honesty, patience, or excellence, but your repeated choices reveal what you truly practice. This is why small decisions carry enormous importance. People often wait for dramatic opportunities to prove their character, but character is built through ordinary moments. The decision to wake up when the alarm rings, the decision to listen instead of interrupting, the decision to remain calm during criticism, the decision to continue working after disappointment. These moments appear insignificant, yet together they shape the architecture of your mind. Every disciplined action becomes another brick in the foundation of your future identity. One of the greatest illusions is believing that you will make better decisions later if you cannot make them now. The mind does not suddenly become disciplined under pressure. It simply reveals the habits that have already been established. If impatience dominates your ordinary conversations, it will dominate your greatest challenges. If excuses control your small responsibilities, they will appear during major opportunities. Pressure does not create character. Pressure exposes it. This realization should not discourage you. Instead, it should empower you. Every ordinary moment becomes an opportunity to train yourself. Every inconvenience becomes practice. Waiting in a long line becomes an exercise in patience. Receiving criticism becomes an opportunity to strengthen humility. Facing uncertainty becomes an invitation to develop trust. Instead of asking why life keeps presenting difficult situations, begin asking what quality those situations are trying to develop within you. Many people fear discipline because they confuse it with restriction. They imagine a life without freedom, spontaneity, or joy. In reality, discipline creates freedom. The musician practices scales for years to gain the freedom to express beautiful music. The athlete trains relentlessly to move effortlessly during competition. The speaker rehearses carefully to communicate naturally before an audience. What appears effortless is almost always supported by invisible discipline. The same principle applies to your inner life. Emotional freedom does not come from doing whatever you feel in the moment. It comes from no longer being enslaved by every impulse. When someone insults you, you are free to remain composed. When temptation appears, you are free to stay aligned with your values. When fear whispers that you should quit, you are free to continue moving forward. This is not suppression. It is mastery. Conscious choice also requires responsibility. It asks you to stop blaming circumstances for every emotional state. This does not mean ignoring injustice or pretending that life is always fair. It means recognizing that your response remains within your influence. You may not control what others say, but you control whether their words become your identity. You may not control unexpected loss, but you control whether suffering becomes bitterness or wisdom. Responsibility shifts your attention from what cannot be changed to what can. The mind naturally seeks immediate comfort. It avoids uncertainty, effort, and discomfort whenever possible. Yet nearly every meaningful achievement requires temporary discomfort. Growth asks you to enter unfamiliar territory. Learning asks you to admit what you do not know. Healing asks you to face emotions you would rather avoid. The reactive mind resists these experiences because they feel uncomfortable. The disciplined mind understands that discomfort is often the doorway to transformation. This does not mean you become cold or emotionless. On the contrary, true discipline allows you to experience emotions more clearly because they are no longer clouded by impulsive reactions. You can acknowledge fear without becoming paralyzed by it. You can experience disappointment without surrendering hope. You can feel anger without allowing it to destroy your relationships. Your emotions remain part of your humanity, but they no longer determine your destiny. Every conscious choice becomes evidence that change is possible. The first time you remain calm, instead of reacting with anger, you weaken an old habit. The first time you continue despite fear, you prove that fear is not in control. The first time you refuse to make excuses, you strengthen personal responsibility. These victories may appear invisible to the outside world, but within your mind, they are profound. They reshape neural pathways, strengthen self-respect, and gradually replace unconscious patterns with intentional living. The greatest victory you will ever achieve is not over another person. It is over the automatic impulses that have quietly governed your life for years. Every moment presents the same invitation. You can react as you always have, reinforcing the past, or you can pause, observe, and choose the response that reflects the person you are becoming rather than the person you have always been. Every conscious decision is another step toward a mind that is no longer controlled by habit, emotion, or circumstance, but guided by clarity, purpose, and unwavering discipline. Most people try to change their lives by changing their circumstances. They believe that once they earn more money, find the right relationship, achieve a certain level of success, or receive enough recognition, they will finally become confident, disciplined, and fulfilled. This way of thinking seems logical, yet it places your identity in the hands of external events. It assumes that transformation begins outside and eventually reaches within. But genuine transformation always follows the opposite direction. Your external life is a reflection of your internal identity. Until you become a different person in the way you think, perceive, and act, your circumstances will eventually return to familiar patterns. Identity is far more powerful than goals. Goals tell you what you want to accomplish. Identity determines the kind of person you believe yourself to be. A person who sees themselves as unhealthy will struggle to maintain healthy habits, even after achieving temporary success. Someone who secretly believes they are incapable will sabotage opportunities that require confidence. Someone who identifies as a victim will continue finding evidence that life is unfair, regardless of how many blessings appear before them. Every action is filtered through the question your mind constantly asks without words, is this who I am? Think about how often people define themselves by the past. They say they have always been shy, they have always been impatient, they have always been unlucky, they have always struggled with discipline. These statements may seem harmless, but every repetition strengthens an identity. The mind begins protecting that identity because consistency feels safe. Even when a new opportunity appears, the old identity whispers that it is not meant for someone like you. Without realizing it, you begin defending the very limitations you wish to escape. The mind does not resist change because change is impossible. It resists change because every new behavior challenges an existing identity. Imagine someone who has spent years believing they are disorganized. The moment they begin creating structure in their life, an internal conflict appears. The old identity says, this is not who you are. If they are unaware of this process, they eventually abandon the new habit and return to familiar behavior. not because the habit failed, but because the identity remained unchanged. This is why temporary motivation rarely creates lasting transformation. Motivation inspires action, but identity sustains it. Anyone can feel inspired after listening to a powerful speech or reading an encouraging book. For a few days, energy is high. New routines begin. Ambitious plans are written down. But when the excitement fades, the old identity quietly returns. The person begins acting exactly as they did before, because they never changed the story they tell themselves about who they are. Creating a new identity begins with conscious thought. Every repeated thought is a vote for the person you are becoming. If your mind constantly repeats messages of fear, doubt, resentment, or limitation, those thoughts gradually shape your perception of reality. But if you intentionally cultivate thoughts rooted in responsibility, courage, patience, and growth, the mind slowly begins accepting a different version of yourself. This is not about pretending to be someone you are not. It is about choosing thoughts that align with the person you wish to become rather than the habits you are trying to leave behind. However, thought alone is not enough. The mind believes evidence more than imagination. Every action you take becomes proof supporting a particular identity. If you consistently keep your promises to yourself, your mind gathers evidence that you are disciplined. If you continue learning despite difficulty, your mind gathers evidence that you are resilient. If you respond to challenges with patience instead of panic, your mind begins accepting patience as part of your character. Identity is built through repeated evidence collected over time. This is why small actions are so important. Many people dismiss small improvements because they seem insignificant. They wait for dramatic breakthroughs while ignoring the quiet power of daily choices. Yet your identity is not created in extraordinary moments. It is shaped by ordinary repetitions. Reading a few pages every day may seem small, but it reinforces the identity of a lifelong learner. Exercising consistently, even for a short time, reinforces the identity of someone who values health. Speaking honestly during uncomfortable conversations reinforces the identity of someone who lives with integrity. The danger lies in believing that small failures do not matter. Every excuse, every broken promise, every abandoned commitment also contributes to identity. When you repeatedly ignore your own standards, your mind gathers evidence that your words cannot be trusted. Gradually, self-confidence begins disappearing, not because someone else destroyed it, but because you repeatedly taught yourself that your commitments were optional. Confidence is not created by positive thinking alone. It grows when your actions consistently match your intentions. Many people search endlessly for confidence before taking action. They believe confidence must arrive first. But confidence is usually the result of action, not its beginning. Consider a person learning to speak before an audience. They may feel nervous every time they step onto the stage. Yet each speech provides evidence that they survived the experience. Over time, the identity shifts from someone who fears public speaking to someone capable of addressing a crowd. The fear may not disappear immediately, but the identity becomes stronger than the fear. This process requires patience because the mind changes gradually. Years of conditioning cannot be replaced overnight. Just as a river slowly shapes stone through continuous flow, daily actions slowly reshape identity through consistent repetition. Impatience causes many people to quit because they expect immediate transformation. They judge themselves after a few days or weeks without recognizing that lasting change grows quietly beneath the surface long before visible results appear. One of the most powerful practices is aligning your daily routines with the identity you wish to embody. Instead of asking, "What do I need to achieve today?" Ask, "How would the person I want to become behave today?" This subtle shift changes everything. A disciplined person does not wait to feel motivated before acting. A compassionate person does not practice kindness only when it is convenient. A courageous person does not wait for fear to disappear before taking the next step. They act according to identity rather than emotion. This approach also transforms failure. When your focus is only on outcomes, setbacks feel devastating because they appear to erase your progress. But when your focus is identity, every sincere effort reinforces who you are becoming, regardless of immediate results. Missing one workout does not erase the identity of someone committed to health. Making one mistake does not destroy the identity of someone dedicated to growth. What matters is returning to your chosen path instead of allowing temporary failure to redefine you. Your environment also plays a significant role in reinforcing identity. The people you spend time with, the conversations you engage in, the books you read, the content you consume, and the habits you repeat all send messages to your mind about what is normal. If your environment constantly encourages distraction, negativity, or mediocrity, maintaining a higher identity becomes more difficult. This is why intentional living requires intentional surroundings. Protecting your mind is not an act of isolation. It is an act of responsibility. There will always be moments when the old identity attempts to return. Familiar thoughts will whisper that nothing has changed. Old habits will invite you back into comfort. Doubt will question whether your efforts are worthwhile. These moments are not signs of failure. They are part of the transformation itself. Every time you choose your new identity, despite the voice of the old one, you weaken the past and strengthen the future. Eventually, the behaviors that once required discipline begin feeling natural. What once demanded conscious effort becomes effortless because your identity has shifted. You no longer force yourself to act differently. You simply behave according to who you have become. The disciplined choices that once felt uncomfortable now feel authentic. The courageous decisions that once seemed impossible become ordinary. The peaceful responses that once required immense self-control arise with increasing ease because your mind has accepted a new standard for who you are, and every thought you nurture, every promise you keep, and every intentional action you repeat continues shaping that identity into something stronger, wiser, calmer, and far more resilient than the version of yourself that was once limited by habit and fear.